Welcome to my designer class. My name is Mercy and I am independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator. In today's class, I'm going to show you how I made these beautiful cards. And I will first start off with some sponging. I used a couple different things here, but don't worry, this card is actually not too complicated. So right here, I start off with the blue cardstock. Even though you're coloring, you wouldn't necessarily have to. I did like the pool party, some of that influence. So I have a mask here, which this I cut out from the Winter Woods, the snowbank thing. So I will start off by bringing in Balmy blue, and I do like using this, but I'm afraid it's going to cause too much glare. This is just a laminated piece of paper. So I will just work on here and we'll just deal with, it'll get on my scratch paper, which is perfectly fine. Okay, so taking that off, I'm going to bring in my sponge. And one of the things I do like doing, the reasons why I like using that laminate paper is you can start at the edge and work your way on. So maybe you can just tolerate a little bit of glare. I think I will bring it back in just because of that technique. Oh, I just got a little bit there, so we'll just flip it over. Okay, so if you start off on the edge, you can get less of marks. Now this is a fairly light color, so I'm not too terribly concerned, but the darker the color, obviously, the more concerning it can be if you get some of that. So I am kind of creating like a halo around the pine tree. So I'm going to intentionally leave the center lighter. And because I have the blue cardstock, the pool party, I won't have to do as much coloring. So this is a little shortcut if you don't want to do a ton of sponging and you already like the color of the cardstock you plan to use. I'm actually not using any of the ink of the pool party. It's definitely more of a green tone. So I want more of a blue. I don't really want too much green. So, but I will lightly go over the center with the Balmy blue. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and bring in my next color, which is Blueberry Bushel. If I can open this easily. And here is my little Stampin' sponge that I have marked. So again, start off on the edge and work your way up. And that way you don't get as many marks like that. So if I follow my own advice, I would have less problems. All right, so again, I'm kind of trying to create a halo look around the pine tree. So here we go. When I do it properly, sponging is a bit of a trick, I think, but it's not too bad or complicated, and it's certainly a lot of fun, and it really adds a lot of dimension to a background. So if you haven't tried it before, it's very easy and fun. These Stampin' sponges, they work extremely well for this type of job, and they're really quite inexpensive. They're for 3 big sponges that you can cut into 4 pieces. They only are like $3.50, so something to think about with getting. I have tried other sponges before I became a demonstrator, and they really aren't as nice. So, and for that kind of price, it's really not that bad. All right, so I like that quite a bit. I'm going to go ahead and set this aside. And we're going to go ahead and add a little bit of Highland heather. Now, this is just to kind of add a little bit of streaks here and there. We're not going to do a ton of Highland heather. We're just going to add a few purple, like highlights, if you will. And this will when it dries, it will be lighter, this cardstock. So I'm just, again, just adding a little bit here and there. Not a ton, but I kind of want there to be hints of the Highland heather. So that's all it is for the sponging. Now, oh, I forgot my snowbank. Okay, so that's the final step, is the snowbank. So I will go ahead and bring back in my Blueberry Bushel. And this is really simple. All I do is just figure out where I want it. So I don't want a ton of snowbank. I just line it up here, bring in my sponge, and now I'm going to come in really quite dark here and make it more noticeable. So the only thing is when you're doing this technique, you really have to allow time for it to dry. So I would suggest letting at least, I don't know, 20 minutes for it to fully dry. Okay, so you can see how dramatic it looks, and that really, I think it really added a great touch to it. So closing up my stamp pads real quick here, we will set this aside, and I will bring in the one that I've already done, pre-done. And I did two of them, one without the purple and one with the purple, and you can kind of see the difference there. So bringing in my Stamparatus now, I will do some stamping, embossing, I should say. Well, it's both. So just setting this down, I'm going to go ahead, line this up in here, bring in my embossing buddy, and I wanted to talk about a little bit what I did with my embossing powder. Now I decided that I wanted some Dazzling diamonds in it, and what I did is I mixed 2 teaspoons, baby teaspoons of the regular silver embossing powder to one of the Dazzling diamonds. Now, when you use the Dazzling diamonds in the embossing powder, it turns out pretty well. And it's not a problem, it's just a little coarser. It doesn't feel smooth. So if you don't mind that part, I actually really recommend trying it. There are definitely embossing powders on the market where you have glitter in it, and you can definitely certainly do it that way. But if you have Dazzling diamonds on hand and the silver, but don't have a glitter embossing powder, try mixing it. It actually works really well. So here we go. I'm just going to press this down really well, and we have our now Versamark image. I will take it out of the Stamparatus, set this aside, and we will bring in my piece of paper so we can quickly add the Dazzling diamonds and the embossing powder mixture that I created. So this really is beautiful when you, and if you have the ink still wet from doing the background, it will stick all over to it. It's really a big mess, so don't do that. Allow plenty of time. This would be a good, thing if you wanted to do it in different stages. Like one evening you do all the sponging, and the next day you finish it up if you wanted to mass produce. So anyhow, I will bring in my heat gun. Sorry about the racket, but I think this is just a beautiful night scene kind of that you can create this way. And it's really pretty just like after you do the embossing, but then I finish it off with adding snow. Okay, I think this should be hot enough. Let's see, is it coming up? Yes, there we go. So it works just the same. I really didn't see much difference with heat embossing when I've added the Dazzling diamonds. But it adds this beautiful diamond look to the tree, which I thought was really beautiful and well worth the little bit of inconvenience the Dazzling diamonds has, because it is kind of a little messier. Okay, so there we go. It does tend to warp your paper when you do the embossing, but it usually settles down after a little while. I don't find that long term it's a problem. Okay, so this is from the Waterfront set, this stamp, and I love using it for stars and snow and whatever you want it to be. So I'm going to bring in my Whisper White craft ink. And this is definitely a messier ink, and it needs time to dry, or you need to heat set it, and it dries lighter. So I am just coming in and randomly adding snow. And I think this just really sets off the whole card. It makes it really like a beautiful winter scene. And I'd like to add snow to the bottom. Go ahead and add that, and there you have it. Isn't that pretty? So I will set that aside now and bring in my Highland Heather matting, and we will finish assembling this card. Okay, so, oh yeah, the last step was actually to do the sentiment. So I'll go ahead quickly adhere this to the matting. One of the things I sometimes do is after I glue it, I weight it down maybe with my acrylic blocks or something, just to see if I can get some of the warping issue taken care of. The glue kind of helps stabilize it against the base of the, your matting piece of cardstock. So bringing this in, I will just set this down, and I see I got a little off, but we have a tiny bit of wiggle room here thanks to the glue. So that looks pretty good now. I will just see if I can get this to stop warping as much. And isn't that just beautiful? It's a beautiful scene. And I now have my hands pretty messy. So it is better if you probably gave this more time to dry before putting your hands on it. Okay, so as I was saying, we're going to bring back in our Stamparatus. I can't think for sometimes. Making these videos actually makes you forget sometimes. And oh, I forgot to bring in my template. I left that in my basement. But I have a template here. I put this in and then I stamp right on it. So I guess we'll have to skip that step. See, I can't talk, but I do have one made, so not all is lost. But here we go. Here's the set. This is sentiment. I have stamp, and it's a reason to celebrate. And I use these stitched all around set. It's called Stitch Labels, and that to cut it out. So I think that's just beautiful. I see kind of stuff on this one, so it's probably because my hands are a little messy. So I will take a little moment to clean it a little bit with my chamois. Okay, that's better. That hand is definitely better. All right, so for the two cards, I used this ribbon, which is a hemp ribbon, and I used this gorgeous grape. Now I'm using Highland Heather, but because it's the white striped, it really blends very well. So just something to think about if you were like, oh, they don't have Highland Heather. Well, this gorgeous grape, they don't have Highland Heather ribbon, no problem, just use gorgeous grape. It blends super well because of the white primarily. So all I'm doing is just fishing this through here, and it's going to be covered the back part, but having that little bit showing, I think just really sets it off beautifully. So here we go. I'm going to bring in some tear and tape and secure it to the back, if I can find my end to this. Okay, so as the name suggests, you do not have to use scissors, although I often do. Don't ask. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to, as I was saying, just attach this to the back. So I'm gonna just do this kind of free-handed here. And then this one, I'm just gonna make sure it's straight, flip it over, and attach it. And there we have it, quite nicely centered and right there, ready to go. Now you could add dimensionals behind here, which I did with most of them, but you wouldn't have to. It could be just free like this. It will be secured. So just something to think about. You don't always have to actually even attach it if you don't want to, or you could add a few glue dots at this point. So I'm taking off the backing now, and I'm going to go ahead and add some Tombow liquid glue, and you can go right over your tear and tape if you want to still be able to slide it around if you think it's a little crooked, and it won't be a problem at all. Okay, so bringing in my base, and my base is this gray granite, which is really beautiful. It's very neutral, which I think the card, I want it to be just elegant and just a beautiful Christmas winter scene. And I think that definitely does the trick, the gray granite. So I'm just gonna line this up. And there we have our beautiful card. So I'll bring back in the other ones, and you can see what I did here. I don't know You can message me which one you prefer, the white or with the purple, but I think they're both just gorgeous, and I hope you enjoyed watching this. Please give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Consider subscribing. If you need any products, please email me at mewants3@gmail.com. If you would like to order any of the products, don't forget to use my host code. Thanks so much for watching. Happy stamping.